Most kids like me hear a lot of stories and urban legends growing up. They're fun to pass around at slumber parties to scare each other and even more fun to perpetuate. If you bother taking the time to look one up these days and trace it to its root, you'll find out that a lot of them contain random threads of truth. Just enough threads to make them plausible and difficult to refute. Usually the story starts in a similar fashion. Something like, my cousin's girlfriend's brother told me about this strange paranormal game that killed a bunch of people where he grew up. Or maybe it's something like, my father's brother's nephew's cousin's former roommate told me about a series of murders that happened where they worked. So why am I telling you all this? It's because I need you to understand how these things work, how urban legends are born. Stories you hear and pass around were real for someone at some point. Lives could have been ruined or changed forever. Meanwhile, you're laughing with your friends in front of a mirror, calling out for Bloody Mary or even Candyman. Not to disappoint you right away, but this isn't a story I heard from some far removed source. In fact, it happened to me 15 years ago. Sure, people have telephoned it to death, but it's not a popular story outside of where I live, so it's unlikely you've heard it before. Back then, I worked at a famous Southern Ohio haunt. It's still a fairly popular place around here, so I won't tell you the name. For the sake of the story, I'll just refer to it as the dungeon. I'm also not going to give you any names because many people were affected by this besides me. I don't want to out anyone's situation that hasn't been vocal about it or give you an avenue to stalk them. I'm getting this out I guess, for my sake. Tell people move on and to keep something like this from happening again. All you're going to get is a nickname that describes their position or, some kind of indicator. So this truly was and is a great place to work. And I loved the people I work with. There's a few of them I still keep in contact with. The owner is a hell of a guy that's always kind and wants to see the best in people. He would even dress up and roam the haunt to lift morale and entertain the customers to make sure we could rest between groups on overly busy nights. On the downside, wanting to see the best in people sometimes means that things went sideways now and then. I was one of those things, and so were a few other people there. This was because the manager for the actors at the time was a handsy little twat that always seemed to tell you exactly what you wanted to hear. No matter what he did, or how much you knew better, there was just something inexplicable about him that made you believe that you were the only one for him. By opening night, a few hours before we let the customers in, I was devastated. I found out that there were many people for him. It turns out that there were 7 in total. He was sleeping with the entire group of people at the same time while lying to us about the others. When it all came out that some of the other staff were behind us completely. Even the owner did what he could do to protect us from a situation and lend his ear to us if we needed it. He was very compassionate about it at the time, as I recall. Anyway, he raked the guy over the coals about it and threatened to fire him if it continued. But he never actually fired him, even though it kind of continued. He just got smarter with his targets and kept them quiet for longer. It didn't help that his co-manager was one of those girls and unfortunately also started covering up everything because she'd become obsessed with him. Overall, working in the dungeon was amazing. We scared people half to death, showed our costumes off to the kids, and played little games with them when they went through just to make sure that, they were calm and having a good time. We even had the occasional after hours party or get togethers throughout the week. Everything we did, though, we did it as a family. If you've ever worked at a haunted attraction, you know what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, bucket list. One thing we did at our hangout events, besides playing Cards Against Humanity and getting a buzz on, was play games inside the haunt. Our favorite one was actually playing hide and seek throughout the attraction. It might seem silly to think about inebriated grown ass people running around playing hide and seek inside of a haunt, but let me tell you, there's absolutely nothing like it. We would turn every light and sound off in the place and get to hiding. Only one person ever did the finding, and eventually it just became a time trial to see how long it would take for him to find us. He was that good. I don't know how, but he could find you anywhere, no matter how you hid or no matter how quiet you were. We would contort our bodies to fit into spaces, hide in ceiling panels, and even try to cheat and hide in one of the offices. Nothing mattered. Somehow he just always found you. Being hunted like that, because that's what it was, being hunted by someone with that kind of skill and on the creepy ass environment it was happening in, it's indescribable. There just truly is nothing like it. And it was so thrilling and terrifying all at once. The owner had never joined us, but had given our seeker a copy of the key and permission to keep up morale within reason. Seeker was the one who organized our little get togethers. He was a single dad, the kind guy that always had some advice and encouragement to give you. Always thanked everyone that worked there every single night, even though he wasn't a manager or anything like that. I'm explaining this so you understand how safe this was, and how even though you knew how safe it was, it sure as hell didn't feel that way. Before one of our hide and seek sessions, he said he wanted to try something a little bit different. He was big into paranormal games and such, and was always telling us about new ones he wanted to try. We'd played the Midnight Game and several others before, so we were all interested. I don't remember the name, but the rules were fairly simple. He said it was part Bloody Mary, or Candyman, if you will, and a childhood horror version of Tag called Ghost in the Graveyard. So each person had to do a little ritual, and from an old creepy mirror in one of our back rooms before we went out and hid. All I really remember about that is that I had to light a candle and invoke some spirit named Mirror Man by saying his name a few times and telling him it was time to show us the truth about ourselves. We were told that if the ritual worked, we would see someone following us through the haunt. You would see the figure just out of your peripheral vision or always moving quickly around a corner just ahead of you. Once you were hidden, you'd wait 15 minutes and come and find you to show you what you asked for. This became a huge, huge hit at the haunt. It added an even creepier element to the game, not that it needed one. The game then came about outsmarting our genius seeker long enough to see the Mirror Man. It was a big place, but we never had over 8 people playing besides the seeker. Games didn't always even last to the 15-minute mark, but when they did, someone would inevitably make up some story about having seen the Mirror Man. I don't know if anyone ever really saw him, but that didn't even really matter. It added to the legend and made the game legendary amongst those in the know. The downside is that your mind would play tricks on you in the dark, and even when all the main lights were up and you were working on something or the haunt was open to the public, your brain would still think it saw something move into the next scene ahead of you or catch the figure from the corner of your eye. One night, we had a special party with more people than usual. Word had somehow gotten around to the managers. I'll call them Hansy and Miss Codependent for sake of ease. Hansy decided it was time that they and a few of their yes men join in the fun they'd heard so much about. Since they were management, we obviously couldn't deny them. And as one of his girls, a lot of people almost didn't show up. What changed my mind was a phone call from Seeker, who was asking everyone to show up, all the normal players and anyone interested. He said it would be a show of solidarity among the victims and would hopefully make the Hansy manager and his friends uncomfortable enough to leave early. He also added that if it didn't, the people that knew the truth would still outnumber Hansy. Seeker wanted this to be a moral victory. So many of us gave in and agreed to still show up. I was sad to see that Seeker's daughter couldn't make it, but Seeker told me she wasn't feeling all that well and sent us her love. Things went as they always did. We drank, played some Cards Against Humanity. And if you know anything about Cards Against Humanity, you know you can literally torture people mentally through the cards that were played on the person in charge of reading them each round. And every time Hansy or Miss Codependent's turn would come up, it'd have to read cards about relationships, his lack of sexual prowess, her inability to think for herself, and many other terrible things we came up with to torment them based on our card selection. There might have been some cheating involved, I cannot confirm nor deny. Seeker even brought an official blank deck of cards, actually, and a few markers so we could fill in our own cards. I'm sure you can imagine how quickly that got out of hand. After some arguments and the occasional threat, we stopped playing cards sooner than we usually did. Some people were just delicate flowers with no sense of self humor. On the right side, it gave us time to play a few extra rounds of what we had now taken to calling Haunt and Seek. We all went through the familiar ritual and took off into the attraction to find our hiding places. As usual, our seeker waited until everyone had taken their turn alone with Mirror in the back room and scattered before getting started. He always gave us a 10-minute buffer to give us time to get hidden. It was only fair that he received a handicap, after all. This time I hid under the swirling vortex. If you've never seen one or didn't know what it was called, it's basically a black tunnel with odd lights that spins around you as you walk down a narrow, upraised walkway with rails. It's really popular in haunts. There was a spot I discovered while working one day where you could put your back against the partial wall beneath the tunnel and your lower half stretched completely out of sight. You could see where people were coming from and where they were going, but the way you were positioned, no one could actually see you. As usual, I had that sense of being watched. I was confident that tonight was the night that I would either finally see the Mirror Man or last long enough to make a story up about it of my own, to keep the fun going. I was good with it either way. Since I was the first one out of the back room and the tunnel was in a big central area, I saw just about everyone stumble through on their way to hide. I couldn't help but notice that Hansy, Miss Codependent, and their yes men seemed to be way more hosed than everyone else. The more of them I saw, the more I worried that something bad could happen to one of them, or, because of them. Being that drunk in a place like this could be dangerous if you didn't have your senses about you. I was just about to crawl out of my spot and let the seeker know when I heard him yell the words, "I'm coming for you, Barbara." Obviously, it's a Night of the Living Dead reference. It was the seeker's way to let us know the game was afoot. I shifted back into place quickly, hoping for the best. Tonight would be my night, and no one was going to ruin that. Actually, getting to watch our seeker hunt our group was breathtaking. Each movement he took was precise. He walked like the slashers from the 80s with long, silent steps, finding people before they even knew he was near them. It sent a chill down my spine. I assumed he would eliminate Handy's crew first. We sometimes had this game where someone would challenge him to find them first, and somehow he'd never fail. That way we could all get to the actual game without the outsiders ruining the fun. It kind of shocked me, though, to see him go for all the rest of us first. I guess I must have stumped the master, though, because although he was near me a few times, he ended up going for Hansy and his crew after our regulars were found. When I say he went after them, though, I mean he went after them. It was when he found the first of them that I knew something had gone terribly wrong. He yanked Yes Man number one from the floor onto his feet from a spot in the graveyard. He said something that I couldn't quite hear before stabbing him in the abdomen multiple times and stuffing his body into the faux mausoleum. I wedged myself a little further under the tunnel, my screams dying on my lips as I all but willed him not to find me. The next Yes Man he found was in the bathroom scene. It mimicked that scene from the original Nightmare on Elm Street with Nancy and Freddy's glove in the tub. We had plexiglass installed that water ran through to make it seem as if the tub was actually filled with water. With the right lighting and fog, though, man, that thing looked real. After again saying something I couldn't hear and honestly never want to know about, Seeker broke one of the large pieces of plexiglass, and the tub actually filled with water in a quick rush. He held Yes Man number two under the water until he stopped struggling. When he was dead, Seeker put a piece of plywood over the tub, turned off the water, and moved on. I slid my phone from my pocket and held down a button. I nearly lost control of my bladder as the opening tone sounded, signifying that it was powering on. I stuck it in the pocket of my hoodie and gathered loose fabric around it to muffle the sound. I saw Seeker pause for a second, smile to himself, and walk right past my hiding place. Tears slid down my face as I realized he now knew exactly where I was. He didn't come back for me, though. Instead, it seemed to be a game of cat and mouse. I'd suddenly become the final girl or boy or whatever you'd like in a horror film, without the benefit of likely surviving at the end. I couldn't wiggle my fat ass out from under here easily, and I sure as hell couldn't outrun him. His next victim was Miss Codependent. She'd also been hiding in a position to see a little of what was happening, but from the morgue scene. It wasn't nearly as well hidden as mine. More of a hide in plain sight situation, which was visible but didn't seem big enough that someone could even hide in it. That made your brain and eyes somehow overlook it altogether. It sounds weird, but it's actually a haunt technique that works better than you can imagine. Unfortunately for her, it clearly didn't work out at all, not on our seeker. She gave more of a struggle than the others, stabbing him with a box knife she must have grabbed from the hidden partitions. You know, those little spots where in most scenes it usually held water for the actors in the area or tools needed to fix something within the scene if, something broke. I watched as her arm flailed wildly, slicing the left side of his face by random chance alone. He didn't move, he didn't so much as cry out in pain. He just stood there and tilted his head to the side slightly. Before I knew it, he said something again I couldn't make out and grabbed her by the hair on the back of her head. He repeatedly slammed her face into the large metal slab in the center of the scene until it was ruined. Her face, I mean, not the prop. I could hear the cartilage and frontal bones cracking before her limp body hit the floor. Seeker opened one of the body drawers against the wall and carefully slid her into it, closing it in place. Finally, remembering the phone in my hand, I quickly dialed 911 but didn't say a word when the operator answered. I'd once seen some horror movie or TV show, I can't remember which, where a person in distress did this very same thing. They ended up sending an officer to investigate the situation because there was supposed to be some rule about investigating all calls. I didn't know if it was true, but I sure as hell hoped it was. Even though I was pretty sure he knew where I was hiding, I prayed that not calling attention to myself would, I don't know, save me somehow. I shifted my attention back in time to see Seeker heading my way. Just before he reached the opposite end of the tunnel I was hiding under, he shifted direction to the funeral home scene. It was somewhere between the graveyard and the morgue. He yanked the lid from off a coffin and stared down into it. He was close enough this time that I could see his face and hear everything. I could even hear him breathing. I knew that he'd found Hansy at the time because I could hear his voice drunkenly bitching about how Seeker better not have broken the lid or he'd be forced to pay to replace it, if not outright fired. He slurred his words all to hell, clearly not understanding what was happening. This time when Seeker spoke, I heard it all. Suddenly everything made sense in some twisted way. Much like the Mirror Man. He told Hansy his truth. I know what you did to my daughter and how you had your friends cover it up. She committed suicide today. Unfortunately for all of you, she left a note. At that point, Seeker pulled a flask out of his pocket and emptied its contents all over Hansy and the coffin he was desperately trying to pull himself out of. From his other pocket, he produced a pack of matches. Your truth is that you are incapable of being a better person. You surround yourself with yes men to validate even your most damaging life choices. Your burning desire to be the most important thing in every room you walk into has poisoned you and everything you touch. With the simplest action, a quick flick of his wrist, a match was lit and tossed into the coffin. I could smell Hansy's flesh burn as he squealed for someone to save him. The squeals turned to choking sobs as black smoke filled his lungs before the crackling of the coals overpowered the sound. Seeker turned and walked in my direction. I saw the anguish on his face. There was something in his eyes, not regret, no, but a look of resignation. He smiled at me sadly and left. He just left. I crawled out as fast as I could. My short legs fought desperately to propel my fat ass out from underneath the tunnel. The second I cleared the tunnel, I ran out of the attraction to the main office. I saw him enter the back room where we kept the game mirror, and heard the click of the lock. The main office door flew open, and I was quickly pulled inside. Everyone else had survived the ordeal, all our regulars. Each of the people he had found before the murders were told to go to the office and lock the door. They all thought that there was going to be some kind of prank or fight to get back at Hansy and the others for what they'd done, but no one knew what had actually happened or why. I barely let them speak before shouting for them to call the police. Now. In a panic, I rushed through what had happened so quickly they could barely understand what I was saying. A fire alarm went off inside the building, cutting off my second attempt, and we all fled outside and waited for the fire department to arrive. At that point, I was the only person who knew Seeker still had himself locked in the back room. Eventually, I could tell everyone what had happened, including the police officer that had shown up at the scene. The desperate call I'd made to 911 had been noted, but it wasn't until the fire alarm went off they took what they thought might have been a prank call seriously. Thanks to the state-of-the-art fire alarm the owner insisted on putting into the building, the fire was put out easily, and they found all the bodies intact, except for Hansy's. They had used dental records to identify him. Other than the funeral home scene and a little smoke damage in the neighboring scenes, the attraction itself was just fine. There was only one thing still in the back room when the fire department broke down the door. Before you take a guess, and you end up wrong, no. It wasn't Seeker. Somehow, in a concrete room, with no other exits, he disappeared. The only thing there was that old mirror we'd stood in front of every session before our game. Last week I heard a story about the Mirror Man from my younger cousin's boyfriend's sister. It was about someone called the Mirror Man, actually. They say that if you follow a certain ritual before a game of hide and seek, the mirror man will find you. Each person has to do a little ritual in front of a full length mirror before a game of hide and seek begins. They have to light a candle and invoke some spirit named the Mirror Man by saying his name a few times and telling him it was time to show them some truth about themselves. I was told that if the ritual worked, a person would see someone following them. You would see that figure out of your peripheral vision or always moving quickly around a corner just ahead of you. And once you were hidden, you would wait 15 minutes. He'd come find you and show you what you asked for. I'm not ashamed to admit that I tried it myself tonight. I didn't play hide and seek with myself, obviously, but I stood in front of my full length bathroom mirror, lit a candle, and said, Mirror Man, Mirror Man, Mirror Man. And I stood there in my bathroom in the dark for 15 minutes. And as I expected, nothing happened. I turned on the light and I went about the rest of my evening. All too often, people create their own monsters. They create their own legends. Every action and decision you make has a consequence, good or bad. Part of me likes to think that Seeker is still out there somewhere, dishing out punishments and maybe even saving our lives. The rest of me hopes he's at peace somewhere. As a parent myself these days, I can't imagine anything I wouldn't do to anyone that hurt my little girl. While all urban legends contain a shred of truth, I'm sad to say that not all truths are worth repeating. No. Some things are better left to the dead.